Unesh, Criosphinx Sovereign versus the Haunt of Hightower, Ezuri, Claw of Progress, and Malfegor. We've got Sphinxes, we've got Ramp. Extra planar lens isn't really something we want to see this early on. Do we actually want to get rid of that? Yeah, that's actually not as good as I thought it was on second thoughts. That is way better. I really like a turn 1 Rhystic Study. That's lots of card draw for us. Nothing from Ezuri on turn 1, but an expedition map for the Haunt of Hightower. We get into a Force of Will, but we're not worried about that just yet. We're going to go in for our turn 1 Rhystic Study and hope that no one scoops. Then nothing from either of our opponents after that, but the mono black player is going for expedition map now. We'll see what they go for here. It is a Reliquary Tower, so they're looking to draw a lot of cards, clearly. And they're not the only one. But we're already on a little bit of a clock because, well, we win this one, but we do have Mana Crypt Bolts to worry about. There is another Sphinx. We want to get into mana more than we want to get into Sphinxes at this point, although I'm not exactly going to complain about having a Sphinx in hand. Because we got the study down so quickly, we do actually have more draws to make, maybe on this cycle of the turns. Okay, and there's our first card draw from a Charcoal Diamond. Our opponent doesn't really have much choice in the matter with Rhystic Study, so we're forcing them to let us draw cards. We get into a land, which is really good. Definitely don't want to be missing land drops in this deck. Alright, a Strip Mine coming down for Ezuri. And deciding not to strip mine us, they're going for a Farhaven Elf. We get into a Myriad Landscape, so I think we're playing the Myriad Landscape and holding up foil next turn. And the black player just seems to be mimicking what we're doing, apart from making our entire deck with black borders, of course. Yeah, they're going for some card draw of their own on a 3-mana enchantment. Now then, do we want to go? We've just been really lucky and gotten into more fast mana. Do we want to go for our commander? And the luck continues. We win the flip for a second time. Caged Sun is not much good with no islands, but we do have Myriad Landscape, which we can play this turn. I think I am going to go in for the Mana Vault. We don't have an unlimited hand size yet, unfortunately. We will allow the Malfegor to decide on which cards they want to try and give us. Oh, that is an absolute no-brainer. Our opponent allowing us to choose between islands and a strip mine. So we go... yeah, we could really do with an unlimited hand size here. Let's go for the Myriad Landscape intact. This is where the free counter magic is going to come in handy. We discard 2 cards, I think, because we're so far ahead. Yeah, I'm going to risk getting rid of, Command Beacon and an island. Our artifacts might get wiped out, which is the only ramp that we've got in this deck apart from Nykthos. So I might regret getting rid of the Command Beacon, but I'm hoping we can keep the discard from Malfegor under wraps. Okay, Oath of Ghouls, I don't know what that is. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player chooses target player whose graveyard has fewer cards in it than their graveyard does, and is their opponent. The first player may choose a creature card and put it into the hand. I actually quite like that, especially if our Sphinxes are going to be going down. Bloodchief Ascension, I may regret allowing a Bloodchief Ascension in, but I'm going to. Can always swing in at the Rakdos player first and try and get them out. A Temple of the False God from Ezuri. And it is Ezuri Claw of Progress, and they do pay into the Rhystic Study. Now the Haunt of Hightower is jumping up to 8 cards in hand, thanks to the Phyrexian Arena. And they've got a Mana Crypt of their own, so a couple of players managing to keep up with us on mana. I'll certainly allow a Mana Crypt. Perhaps shouldn't, but I don't want our opponents scooping on us, and that is something you have to play around in Modo. unfortunately. Then a Megrim from our opponent. Yeah, that's quite tricky. I mean, we can try and counter the discard stuff, but this is a match made in heaven between the Haunt of Hightower and the Malfegor players. Now, quest for the Nile Stone. Whenever an opponent discards a card, put a quest counter on it. If that player has no cards in hand, and this has 2 or more quest counters on it, that player can lose 5 life. Alright, well, there's no danger of us having no cards in hand. Okay, time to start taking some damage, potentially. Okay, winning 3 times in a row from the crypt, but we're certainly going to take damage on the Mana Vault. Okay, we need to try and get some ramp going, so let's go for Sapphire Medallion. I'd really like to get down the Caged Sun next turn. So this time, let's just go for a Preordain, I think. And we can scry a couple of things away here. So let's get rid of an island, because we've got a land to make next turn. And then we've got a couple of Sphinxes as well. Oh, 3 Sphinxes, so we'll put that on the bottom also. And we draw into Cyclonic Rift, which is really good to have in hand. We're going to have to discard some stuff again, unfortunately. Alright, Ezuri's probably coming in our way. Can Ezuri put counters on itself? Another target creature. Alright, so I'm actually going to leave the Sphinx back for now. Might have to start countering stuff just to keep cards out of our hand. So we'll get rid of Fact or Fiction, don't need that. And this is where we start losing some life now. We've got to discard a couple more things. Get rid of Engulf the Shore. And the Sphinx of Athun, because we can get that back with the Oath by the looks of it. Megrim deals 6 to us. Maybe should have countered that. And then a bunch of quest counters on the Nile Stone. But I'm just trying to set up currently. We need to get our mana fixed a little bit better than it is currently. A tap land and a Warm Power Stone will draw us into another card. We get into an island, which is good because we needed that for foil. We can discard a land and another card rather than pay the cost for that. And the idea of this deck is that we tap out for ramp and Sphinxes. And we don't really have much chance to hold up counter magic. So I've gone for all the free counter magic spells that I could think of, 2 of which are in our hand currently. A Rhystic Study of his own, and paying into ours, so knowing how to play Rhystic Study. Alright, now there's 2 Rhystic Studies to pay into, so there's going to be a lot of card draw between ourselves and Ezuri. They pay into ours. Let's see if they pay into the Simic players. Okay, paying into both and going for Wheel of Torture. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, it deals X damage to that player, where X is 3, minus the number of cards in their hand. Well, I think it's definitely worth getting rid of that. So let's exile a card from our hand. We'll go for Sarah Sphinx. And we are not going to pay into the Rhystic Study, unfortunately, because we need to crack this Myriad Landscape at the end of our turn. Okay, now the Oath of Ghouls has triggered. Choose a target player whose graveyard has fewer cards in it than their graveyard does. So let's have a look. Well, we'll just choose the Rakdos player. They have fewer creatures in the graveyard than us because they don't have anything in the graveyard. Might as well use the ability. I'm hoping to get into an unlimited hand size. We lose the Mana Crypt flip finally and get into another island. So because we're going for Caged Sun this turn, we'll get down an island because the more basics we have in play, the more mana we're going to have from our mana doubler. Not going to pay into Rhystic again, breaking my own cardinal rule, but I think it's just a case of trying to outrace our opponents at this point. Certainly name blue with that. And then just to... do we want a bunch of cards in our hand is the question. Let's go in for Dream Eater this time. instead of the Sphinx of Athun. We'll actually dig further with that, and we can pay for the Rhystic Study with the floating mana. Yeah, we get to surveil here. So let's go Unesh on the stack first. And then we'll surveil 4 with the Dream Eater. And let's have a look here. I mean, we want all of this stuff, don't we? Let's go that one on top. And then what does this do? I don't know what all the Sphinxes do. I can't remember them all. Becomes the target. Okay, counter it. So that's just a cheap Sphinx, basically. Yeah, let's go. Yeah, we've got a couple of islands, so we'll go on top, Sol Ring on top, and Glyph Keeper on top. Then we can return a permanent. Let's get rid of the Maegrim, because I think we're going to have to discard cards here. I haven't actually worked it out. Then Unesh triggers, and we will ask the Ezuri player to split it up this time. We obviously know what's on top because we just put it all there. Alright, well, it's a choice between 2 Sphinxes or more mana. We've got a couple of lands to make already, so we might as well get more card draw with our Sphinxes. Then the biggest threat between everyone is the mono black player currently, so we are going to swing in with Unesh this time. I really don't like that Maegrim. And we've got a blocker for Ezuri now anyway. That does put a counter on the Bloodchief Ascension, unfortunately. Now we need to think really hard before we go for a foil, because it's mass artifact destruction I'm scared of currently. That would really set us back. Something like a Bane of Progress wouldn't be good, and I'm sure Ezuri has Bane of Progress. Mind Crank is a combo piece. Yeah, a combo piece that forces mill. And a Commandeer, that's another free one. We can exile 2 blue cards from the hand rather than pay this cost. Gain control of a target non-creature. But we're going to allow the Mind Crank in for now. Then it is Malfegor. When it enters the battlefield, discard your hand. Each opponent sacrifices a creature for each card discarded this way. Yeah, I mean, have to be careful with the foil. At least we've got Commandeer now. We won't be able to counter a Bane of Progress with that. I think we just have to get rid of a Sphinx here. We discard an island, and we'll get rid of that Sphinx. Triggering the Rhystic Study again, feeding Ezuri more card draw. So Ezuri now up to 11 cards in hand. Luckily they don't have too much mana to go with it. And the 3rd mana crypt of the game coming down. We get into Ancient Tomb. That's probably one of the last lands we want to see against these 2 black players that want to drain us. And Marwyn the Nurturer, speaking of not having enough mana to go with the cards in hand. This looks like it might be an elf deck then. We've got 3 elves in play. And Marwyn likes to be in elf tribal decks. And if any archetype can make a bunch of mana, it's elves. Presence of Gond is a means of making more elves. And it's going on to Ezuri, which can tap. We don't have to pay for it, do they? No, it's just tap. Yeah, I think we just have to allow it. Unfortunately, Ezuri can put a bunch of plus counters onto Marwyn here. They tap the Ezuri immediately to make an Elf Warrior. That will trigger Marwyn, but it will also give our opponent another XP counter, which means at the beginning of combat, they can put even more counters onto Marwyn. Might be time for a Cyclonic Rift, unfortunately. And at the end of the turn, they discard an Azusa. So clearly they like how much mana they're going to be able to generate. And thanks to the Oath of Ghouls, they'll be able to get that Azusa back in hand anyway. Mind Crank triggers on the mono black player because they lost life to Phyrexian Arena. Looks like they lost to the Mana Crypt flip as well because they've got a bunch of cards in the graveyard now, including an Awaken the Erstwhile. They managed to make their land anyway, followed by a Sol Ring, and they feed us more cards. Definitely don't care about Ancient Tomb now that we're getting into all these islands that tap for 2 blue. Lots of fast mana going around this game though. And then it is Haunt of Hightower. And they pay into the Ezuri's Rhystic Study, but not ours. I don't know if they paid attention to which Rhystic Study they were paying for there. Well, there's nothing we can do about that. So we will just allow down the Haunt of Hightower. We'll probably swing in with 2 Sphinxes their way. And the Bloodchief Ascension continues to be a threat over there. 1 more counter and that'll start triggering. Okay, so again, we're going to target the Rakdos player, and we will get a Sphinx back into hand from our graveyard. We're certainly making use of Oath of Ghouls, more so than the Rakdos player who played it. Get back the only creature in our graveyard, the Glyph Keeper. And now we're starting to lose Mana Crypt flips. I don't know how many we've won and how many we've lost so far. Okay, the Haunt of Hightower triggers. Whenever a card is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, put a plus counter on it. I don't know where those... Oh, and of course it's the Mind Crank. So because we lost life to the Mana Crypt and the Mana Vault, we've been Mind Cranked, and that triggers the Haunt of Hightower. Might have to go for that Vedalken Shackles we just drew into. Let's look at Ponder first. And I am going to pay into that Rhystic Study. Reliquary Tower, excellent, that's just what we want. So let's go. Don't need Evacuation with Cyclonic Rift in hand. I'll hammer it on top, then the Reliquary Tower. Oh, we've already played a land, haven't we? Definitely shouldn't have done that. Yeah, we have. Okay, well, not to worry. Let's go Vedalken Shackles. Then I'm going to go for Sphinx of the Final Word, just in case someone's got counter magic for a Cyclonic Rift. We will pay for the study again, now that we've got a surplus of mana. Triggers Unesh again, and again we'll go for the mono black player this time. We've spread it around a lot so far. We know of 2 cards that are on top. Okay, it is between another Sphinx and another island. I'm going to go for the Warm Power Stone here. And then I think we have to go for Warm Power Stone and feed a Rhystic Study card. Yeah, going to have to go for that because we need to hold up 2 mana for the Vedalken Shackles to steal this thing away. So we'll go in at the Ezuri player for 10 damage, and that Mind Cranks them, which puts a bunch more plus counters onto the Haunt of Hightower. I told you these 2 were going to marry well together. Gets rid of a... what is that? Oh, Sun Quan, Lord of Wu. Don't know what that does. Horsemanship. Oh yeah, makes stuff unblockable basically. Grim Monolith, Genesis Wave, Spark Double, Llanowar Elves. Eternal Witness is good to get rid of. Simic Manipulator, yeah. Getting rid of some good stuff there. And then we have to discard... we'll get rid of an Ancient Tomb. And I think we're okay to get rid of Castle Vantress. Don't really care about that, to be honest. It's really a last-ditch attempt to get into good cards if we're not managing to draw, but the deck's doing quite well on our first run of this Unesh deck. Oh, but the Bloodchief Ascension is active. I did not notice that. Oh, of course, it's at the end of the turn now, isn't it? And because the Ezuri lost life, this thing is going to start draining. Luckily, if we steal away that Haunt of Hightower, we're going to be able to gain life. So we'll be drained for 2 twice from the Bloodchief Ascension, putting the Rakdos player up to 44. Oh, actually, is that infinite with the Mind Crank? Yeah, I didn't put 2 and 2 together there when I should have done. Alright, so in that case, every time we lose life, we're going to get milled. Every time we get milled, we lose life, so we're going to have to go for a Cyclonic Rift onto the Bloodchief Ascension there, unfortunately. Cyclonic Rift with the Rhystic Study paid. Yeah, I should have seen that and I didn't, so we'll just have to take the 6 there. At least we don't lose immediately, but I really would have liked the Cyclonic Rift overloaded. And now we're going to have to block with this thing. Yeah, that was a big oversight from me. If someone can manage to get this thing out of the way, we actually go down to commander damage. Yeah, so me not spotting that combo was potentially game losing. Out comes the Bloodchief Ascension again, and feeding us a in Bolas's Clutches, so if our opponent manages to get rid of the shackles, we can still steal this with the Bolas's Clutches. I was looking to swing in with the Haunt of Hightower on our next turn, but thanks to my not seeing the combo, yeah, that's, well, we'll have to see what happens, but that feels pretty bad. No one but myself to blame for it, though. And then it is a Mana Reflection, and hopefully, okay, I was going to say hopefully we draw into another free counterspell here to try and protect ourselves from losing. I'm sure the black player has a means of removing this, and I have no doubt that they'd swing in at us and get rid of us for the rest of the game there. Ezuri going in for another elf, so that they can tap for even more mana on this. The mana from this is doubled with the Mana Reflection, and it's noteworthy as well that they got bolted from the Mana Crypt, so a land, the Elvish Champion, and a Gaia Sage going into the bin. Then tapping their Marwyn for 10 mana, and going for Elvish Guidance. I don't know that one. When the enchanted land is tapped for mana, you get an additional green for each elf in play, and that goes on an untapped island. We continue to draw cards, but not getting into our free counter magic, unfortunately. We've got a Commandeer for something like Doomblade or something like that, but it all depends on what our opponent goes for here. A Growth Spasm, that doesn't really help us currently, so we will allow our opponent to keep it. Okay, a Muldrifter from our opponent, and continuing to give us cards. They've got 7 cards in hand already, and they're doing all of this in the first main so that they can dump a bunch of pluses onto something. And they didn't pay the evoke cost on that, so probably getting down the Muldrifter not only for the card advantage, but to get a flying blocker in the way. Now a Soul Foundry, I don't know that one either. When it enters the battlefield, you may exile a creature from your hand, create a token copy of it, where X is the CMC. Yeah, they could go for something like a Priest of Titania. Yeah, we'll allow it. I don't know of any combo, I might miss another combo here. Although I don't know what's in my opponent's hands, so I could be forgiven for that. They go for, Phyrexian Metamorph. They don't have the mana to do it, fortunately for us. Now the Ezuri putting even more counters onto this thing. If I survive until next turn, I may well gain control of the mana doubler in Mana Reflection. And there goes that Bloodchief Ascension again, definitely going to have to keep an eye on that. Looks like they got bolted again, so there is a Vamp Tutor and a Rotting Rats and a load more Swamps in the bin now, thanks to the Mind Crank over there. Now, can our opponent get this Sphinx out of the way is the question. They may well use all their mana and forget about the propaganda. We just have to keep our fingers crossed, everything crossed here. Maybe punished for my oversight. Speaking of my opponent's graveyards, haven't looked in my own yet, have I? Okay, there's a Bloodhusk Ritualist. Target opponent discards a card for each time it was kicked. Okay. Don't know who they're targeting here yet. I think they have to come down with the multi-kicker, don't they? Yeah, I don't think they've cast the multi-kicker there. But yeah, as I was saying, we haven't looked through our own graveyard yet, have we? Unfortunately, getting rid of Time Twister and Time Spiral, they were both stuck together. And they are the means of us shuffling our graveyard back in, the only two means. I actually thought of replacing the Time Twister, or maybe even the Time Spiral, with the one that you can play with Flashback. Yeah, definitely have to go for that. What are we doing here? No, we don't have to discard a card there because they didn't kick it. Really, really glad to see Lightning Greaves. If we can manage to steal this and give it haste, we're going to gain a bunch of life. and potentially knock someone out of the game. Now it is Fraying Omnipotence. Each player loses half their life, then discards half the cards in their hand, and sacrifices half the creatures they control, rounded up. That's 2 creatures for us. Do we allow this? I mean, they're tapped out now, and it's each player anyway, so there's really no point in a commandeer on that. There's no free counterspell. Yeah, we're just going to have to allow that, unfortunately. We can get a creature back out of the bin with the Oath. Mind Crank triggering on all of us because we lose half our life. Now then, we have to discard 7 cards. So that's a Frantic Search, a Consecrated Sphinx. As much as it pains me, we have to watch how many cards we're drawing now. A Metamorph, an Island, the Automaton, I think, and then it's 2 more. Yeah, we'll just get rid of... We'll have to hope to get into more islands. So it is a Sphinx and another island. That puts a load of triggers on the stack. We'll see what our opponents are discarding momentarily. Then we have to sacrifice 2 creatures, so getting rid of our Unesh, which we might not actually mind. Because, like I said, we want to watch the number of cards we draw. Let's get rid of our tapped creatures. Then it is a Mana Dork and a couple of tokens from the Elf player, and no prizes for guessing who the Haunt of Hightower chooses. And let's see what the Ezuri player discarded. There is... oh, I don't know what they discarded. I think it was just a Howling Mine. Oh, there's more stuff here. Howling Mine. There's a Sylvan Caryatid. A Simic Manipulator, I think we've already seen. Tharda Adele. The Elvish Mystic and the Farhaven Elf. Then that quest for the Nile Stone is getting a bunch of counters on it. I don't think that's dealt any damage to anyone yet. And now in response to all this, the Rakdos player is going for something. That is a Shriveling Rot. Until... where is that now? Until end of turn, whenever a creature is dealt damage, destroy it. Until end of turn, whenever a creature dies, that creature's controller loses life equal to its toughness. There's really no point in us. Yeah, we're going to lose our Sphinx and lose 6 life. And then it's going to deal damage to this. And that's going to die as well. That changes things. Alright, well, we'll have to let it through. There's no point in gaining control of that either with the Commandeer. But it might be that the Rakdos player goes down. When does... they have no cards in hand, so when does this deal damage? At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep. It's just 5 life, okay, so there's no way to stack that unless you give them multiple upkeeps. Discarding a Kozilek, who's that? The mono black player. They've got a bunch of stuff in the graveyard here, obviously. So you can just pause the video and have a look there. I don't know who's discarding this. Ah, it is the Azorius player. Might have to put an Eldrazi in here for the exact same reason. Okay, so the Ezuri player shuffles the graveyard back in. And now Haunt of Hightower is going to become absolutely massive. It might be that they swing in at the Rakdos player just to keep hold of their Haunt of Hightower, but they may also not mind the fact that it gets destroyed. Now, the moment of truth, now that the stack has finally been cleared. And they are going in at the Rakdos player, that's surprising. I mean, I don't mind one bit. But it does mean that the Rakdos player goes down, gets rid of that nasty Mind Crank that's been doing us all a great disservice. The only problem with this is that the Oath of Ghouls goes down, and we have gained a little bit of card advantage from that by getting our creatures back. But I think card advantage is the least of our concerns currently, so down goes the Rakdos player. And I really didn't think that we were going to make it through to the next turn, so you're not going to find me complaining here. Now we have to untap the Mana Vault here because I have to be conscious of how much life is being lost, because we're going to get bolted here. There you go, called it. So we go down to 5. We have to get blockers in the way. Well, we'll go for... We've got 14 mana. 16 if we go for this. And our commander is... Yeah, what do we do? Let's go for our commander. The more cards we have, the more we can do with a commandeer in hand. And it's also a cost reducer for our other sphinxes. So in theory we can get more bodies out here. Not going to pay for Rhystic Study. We will allow Ezuri. Okay, there's a High Tide for even more mana. I think we have to take the free counterspell, don't we? Although how much can we do with a High Tide? We pay 1 there, we'll have 1 floating, then it'll be 3, 6, 9, 12. That'll be 13 mana. 16 if we drop an island. I think we just have to go for the Pact. That's the safest play. Only got 24 cards left in the library. I think we have to hold up Evacuation, which is 2 blue and a Reliquary Tower, leaving us with 6. We'll go Sphinx of Athun, and again not paying into the Rhystic Study, and we'll get a heap of cards in hand here. Allow the black player to separate one of them. Okay, choosing between all of those, another counterspell would do. But Reality Shift gets rid of a pesky commander. Although we're going to have to go for Imbolus's Clutches here anyway. I think we just have to try and keep as many cards in hand as possible. Yeah, let's go like that. Then we'll allow Ezuri to pick this time. And there's a bunch more mana. Extra planar lens they surely don't want us to have. Yeah, I think we go for the land and the extra planar lens here. Oh, the mono black player scoops. That is a huge game changer. I was actually going to go for Imbolus's Clutches there, but they decide to scoop it up, so now it's between the two of us. Can we win now? We can take control of Muldrifter. Yeah, that is a huge game changer. Our opponent shouldn't scoop in situations like that. We'll go for Dalcan Shackles onto the Muldrifter. And then it is... Oh, we can't quite get them, can we? We can go for an island. And then I think we just... Yeah, we'll go for Lightning Greaves, swing in at our opponent with a couple of creatures. Feed them more cards with the Rhystic Study because I want to hold up Evacuation just in case. Alright, now it is Soul Foundry coming in as a copy of something. This is why I held up the Evacuation. So they're getting another creature into play. Don't know what this comes down as a copy of. Probably Sphinx of Athun. Nope, they're just going for a straight Muldrifter. Let's put the Lightning Greaves onto Sphinx of Athun. Then we swing in with these two heavy hitters. And we've got the Evacuation held up for if we are desperate to wipe the board, along with a bunch of counter magic, so I've got my fingers crossed that we can't really lose this one. Does Muldrifter get sacrificed at any point? No, you just keep it in play forever. So they decide to block with that anyway. Going down to 7, and we go wide on them next turn. We don't have anything else to play, so we'll get rid of Thran Dynamo. Extra planar lens, I don't think we need. We'll certainly get rid of an island. Then 3 more cards. Yeah, we'll get rid of extra planar lens. An island. I don't think we care about Reliquary Tower now. Yeah, we just want as much blue stuff in hand because of our commandeer, so let's get rid of an island. Yeah, I was talking about taking control of the Haunt of Hightower with the Vidalcan Shackles previously. Whilst all of that turn was going on, I actually remembered that we can't take it thanks to this caring about power. Is it power? Yeah. Power less than or equal to the number of islands you control. We don't control anywhere near enough islands to take a 35 power creature. And there is Champion of Lampholt. That will make things unblockable. We've actually got enough damage on our opponent to swing in at them with haste next turn. So I say we allow the Champion of Lamholt and then go for... do we want to risk it? Our opponent might have an uncounterable spell is the problem. Yeah, I think it's too risky that. Let's just go for Pact of Negation onto the Champion of Lamholt. We'll say no there. Oh, actually, our stuff can't be countered thanks to this, so... Yeah, okay, so I would have played that differently then. Still learning this deck. This is the first time I've ever played it, and I've never played with this thing before. But I was worried about an uncounterable counterspell coming in at us in response to an evacuation, but we don't have to worry about that now. Okay, going for Findhorn Elves. We get into another Sphinx. And now, with 8 cards in hand, how much can our opponent do with a heap of mana? Jiraga Warcaller, does that stop us from blocking? I don't think so. It's a buff, isn't it? Yeah, that's just a big buff on creatures. And it's noteworthy that they decided not to multi-kick that because Ezuri can put the plus counters on it. And give a buff to all the elves in play. And a Sensei's Top from our opponent. They can look at the top 3 cards and draw into an answer if they've got one. They look at the top 3 cards and then decide to draw one, so I wonder what they've got here. Master Biomancer, yeah, I'm not worried about any of this unless our opponent can give it all haste, which they might be able to do with a Concordant Crossroads. That might be their plan. At the beginning of combat, Ezuri can put a bunch of plus counters onto the multi-kicker, Jiraga Warcaller, and that's going to make their elves absolutely massive. There we go. A 13-13, 25-25, 11-11, twice, and a 12-14. This is going to put a bunch of plus counters on stuff as well. Looks like a really fun deck that our opponents made. Couple of tribal decks going against each other. Okay, and then deciding to swing in with a couple of creatures. They've still got a bunch of mana available. And they have paid for the propaganda by tapping the mana crypt for 4 mana. I'm just going to go for blocks here. And if our opponent decides to go for... These don't have trample, do they? I'll check in a minute. No trample. And no trample from anything. Worst case scenario, our opponent does something at instant speed. Yeah, we have blocked correctly there. Worst case scenario, they do something like trample at instant speed. And we go for an evacuation anyway. Now, an Elvish Promenade. Yeah, we're just going to bounce all those tokens back with an evacuation, I think, so... Yeah, we're not going to commandeer that, because we don't control any elves, so it would be pointless. But certainly don't want to waste a commandeer on something we don't need anyway. And look at that. They all come in as 23-23s, thanks to the Master Biomancer and Jiraga. So definitely showing off what the deck is meant to do here. Then tapping down that land with the Elvish Guidance for a whole heap of mana. They've still got 5 cards in hand. Okay, then a Primordial Hydra, and there's another unlimited hand size in Thought Vessel. Primordial Hydra, X plus counters on it, and it's doubled, yeah, that will have trample on it, but our opponent's already gotten past combat phase, so we're not worried about that. And they can't give it haste anyway. Now a Clever Impersonator. Does Clever Impersonator do anything? It's any non-land permanent on the battlefield, so it can get through Shroud. Yeah, what do we care about here? They could go after the Shackles, although they don't control enough islands. They've only got 3 islands. Yeah, we'll just allow that. We can afford propaganda if they go after that. And they can only make 1 blocker out of the Clever Impersonator. They go for the Sphinx of the Final Word, followed by making another Phyrexian Metamorph. The problem is now, actually, one thing I didn't think about is if we need to counter free counter magic. Although we can commandeer the counter spell, can't we? That doesn't count as countering it, so yeah, that's one thing we could do. Sphinx of Athun comes down, and that's no doubt what our opponent needed. We've got that Sensei's Divining Top on top of the library, because they just put it there this turn, as we saw. You can have an Eternal Witness and a Sensei's Top, or a Cyclonic Rift. And they decide to take the Sensei's Top and the Eternal Witness. Now at the end of the turn, thanks to our haste, we can go Evacuation, undo all of our opponent's hard work there. And it can't be countered, even if our opponent does have free counter magic, so yeah, don't need to worry as much about this as I thought. We bounce 2 of our creatures back, we get rid of our opponent's blockers. They did manage to get 2 flyers in the way. And yeah, at the end they decide to scoop it up there. All we have to do is go in for one of our Sphinxes, put Lightning Greaves on it and swing into our opponent. Don't know if I mentioned it or not, I think I did very quickly. I couldn't have taken the Haunt of Hightower with this. I would have had to take it with this, which I would have done. I did notice that in time, but the black player scooped it up. You all saw the error that I made when I didn't see the infinite combo, so I kept us all in the game there, but certainly could have done better that turn. Probably would have overloaded Cyclonic Rift, but as it happens, I'm glad it played out the way it did, because I think with the board state that we had I have gone for an overloaded Cyclonic Rift at that point, I think we would have had at least 1 player scoop, and perhaps everyone would have scooped at that point, so I'm glad it played out the way it did with my pretty big mistake there. Anyway, this is the first time I've ever played this deck. A few tweaks to be made, but I think it went very well. So hopefully you all enjoyed this one. Don't forget to leave a like and a subscribe if you enjoy the content. I'll soon be getting out the Patreon and the Discord, so hopefully you all look forward to that as well. I'm tribalkai on the EDH channel. Thank you for watching.